My girlfriend refuses to do anything with her life and lives by leeching off me. She wouldn't let me break up with her, so I had to resort to extreme measures to get my way, plus 5 updates. About 2 years ago, my girlfriend dropped out of college, and since then, she's become a pathetic and disgusting human being. I know that sounds bad, but I literally work 50 to 60-hour weeks to sustain us because she's too pretty to work. Just today, I came home at 6 p.m. to find her in bed, surrounded with half-eaten takeout boxes, having not showered or brushed her teeth, with the only time she's gotten out of bed being to go to the door and collect her takeout. I had a rough day at work, and seeing this tipped me over. I raised my voice saying she can't live like this, and in response, she became physically violent. I wanted to break up with her there and then, but she guilt-tripped me, saying she has no one to turn to. She stayed in bed for the rest of the day, and a few hours later I came into her room telling her I can't do this. I don't care who she turns to, but I cannot, for my own mental health, be with her. She tried guilt-tripping me again, but when that didn't work, she got out of bed. She ran to the kitchen, grabbed a pair of scissors, and threatened to unalive herself. I didn't risk calling her bluff, and agreed to stay with her. She's currently sleeping, and I've decided I'm going to break up with her tomorrow. If she does that again and goes through with it, not my fault. I don't care. Update 1. Last night when we were both getting ready for bed, I didn't take my clothes off, and instead just stood there telling her we needed to talk. At first, she was just smiling and jumping up and down on the bed with her knees, thinking I wasn't as serious as I was, but eventually, she was able to read the mood. I told her something wasn't feeling right anymore, that I've tried to make this work and be patient with her for the past few years, but I didn't know how much more time I was willing to spend waiting for her to get a job, go back to school, or just get a hobby if anything. I told her that it annoyed and grated me that she just didn't seem to care about herself, and that I hated she had no goals or aspirations. This was probably the first time in a long time she was as attentive as she's ever been during this conversation. I was incredibly taken aback. She agreed to whatever I was saying, even also giving suggestions on where she can apply, what courses were starting to interest her, and even said I could look over her as she submitted applications online to make sure she wasn't lying. I was in disbelief. In her head, it seemed like I was still willing to make this work, and a part of me believed this would finally be the moment that she would change. So it made the next part even harder for me and for her. At first, I told her I didn't love her the same way, which slowly but eventually led to me saying I didn't feel anything at all about this relationship and was jaded. I was tired and wanted a fresh start with someone who was more goal-oriented and wanted something more out of life. When she realized what I was getting at, she started to cry and asked why I didn't mention this sooner, and I said I've always asked her to cook, to go out with me to try something out, or to just go back to school, even when I offered to pay for her classes, anything. She said she understands that part, but was upset why I didn't say it was leading to me losing interest in her, because from her perspective it seemed as if I still loved her all the same. She started apologizing, saying she wasn't in the right mental state and saying nothing was motivating her, and she genuinely had no interest in any hobbies. The only thing she liked was spending time with me, which is all she looked forward to in the day when I came home. None of this was really affecting my emotions besides making me feel uncomfortable, so I tried to continue by saying I think her lifestyle would be better with another person, but she immediately cut me off and became more panicked. She started to apologize again for what she's done and said she would be a better girlfriend, that she would go with me tomorrow to wherever I wanted to go and would look for courses in August that she could start doing. But she did not want to lose me since she had nothing else in life and absolutely hated that I stopped loving her. There were so much tears and snot that I said we would have this conversation again when she calmed down, and we eventually did in an hour or so. She pleaded to give her 2 months to make a change and give her another chance, and promised that she would change. Again, she listed off all the places she would apply to and said she would be a better partner. I never wanted to make her homeless, so this seemed like a good settlement, even though I still had my doubts. I then reaffirmed that I wanted to see other people, but she seemed much more adamant on this issue than the aspirations issue that she would be able to fix this. She said, just give her a month to try and make the relationship work, and asked me again and again on what she could do to make her love her again, and that she didn't want me to hate her. She said that this was the worst part of it all, in the only person that she had just being done. It seemed as if she was about to break down again, so I said, okay, we'll see how this relationship is in a month. In my mind, if I'm allowing her 2 months to get back on her feet, then by a month, she would already be ready to move on. I also didn't want her to suffer a complete mental breakdown while I was still living her, so giving her a month to let her fix the relationship would give her enough time to accept things. I slept on the couch last night and will probably continue doing so for a while. She came out at at about 3 a.m., wanting to talk some more, but I said I was exhausted and we would do it tomorrow. She then slept on the floor beside me for the rest of the night, apologizing again. When I told her to stop, she silently said okay and sobbed for a bit under her blanket. But that's everything that's happened so far. This was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I regret nothing and feel much better letting everything out. I don't know how this situation will be in 2 months, but I was firm that it was the deadline. Update 2. Last night she said she saw something on TikTok where couples put a phone on a table with a timer and wanted to do something similar for each person to air what made them upset. I said that was dumb. If we were going to talk about our problems, it would be better if there was no time limit. She eventually agreed and said I could go first, asking me first when was the time that I completely lost my love in her. As I said before, it was never one action, but a grating feeling that got worse and worse until it got to this point, and I told her that. So she then asked, when was the time I felt the most angry? I said it would take some time to think for me, and she said that was fine. After a few minutes, something came to mind. I couldn't formulate the right words at first, but it eventually just started to come out. I told her the worst time was when I was first starting at my hospital. To keep it short, the tempo was brutal. It was constant work with little to no downtime, as I was constantly learning new things that school had never taught me, while being expected to be able to handle it as a professional. It was without a doubt the most stressed I've ever been, and I feel like other RNs can relate here. That year hardened the way I think now. That hard work does pay off, if you have the drive and the passion. I told her I think that was when I started losing feelings the fastest. Seeing her at home doing absolutely nothing, coming home to no food made, to her not working a job, to her not learning anything, completely stuck to the internet with nothing to show for it. I said it made me even more upset when I had given suggestions for jobs with pretty easy schedules, or to find a new interest in school that would pan out better than last time, only to be rejected at my every attempt. I told her flat out that it disgusted me. She asked me why I didn't make this a bigger issue at the time, that I should have communicated this to her, but I said there's some things that shouldn't have to be said. I shouldn't have to remind her to wash her ass, eat, do something other than mindlessly scrolling on her phone for hours at a day, every day. I also told her that after coming home from the hospital during more stressful days, the last thing I wanted was to spend my time begging my girlfriend to do something productive, so I held my tongue and settled as she was still nice and caring. I had no other reasons to end it, and so the resentment grew worse from then on. It was around here that I became more mean to my regret now, but I will still input it as I have everything else. I told her that when she dropped nursing, I was upset, since I felt that she was more than capable of doing what I had done. But after spending more time in the relationship, and spending more time getting to know her, I knew that with the type of person she was, there was no way she could have ever finished, which is why I suggested easier and more laid-back jobs, less demanding majors for school. Shit, even if she just cooked or found an interesting hobby at that point, I would have appreciated it. Still, she chose to do nothing for years. It's just the type of person she was, and why I felt done for her romantically over time. She asked me if I hated her, and I said I didn't know. I told her she was very loving and kind, but I hated how she handled her life to this point, that I felt no ill will towards her after airing everything out, but I also felt nothing else. I just felt done and ready to move on. Throughout this conversation, we kept eye contact, and there were times it seems like she would break, but like she said, she remained as calm as she could while I said what I had to say. I told her I was done and she could say her piece now, but she asked if we could continue the conversation later and locked herself in our room for the rest of the day. The next day, we sat down again and finished the conversation. She told me that she thinks she's depressed, saying that she didn't feel sad before that night, just had no motivation of doing anything. I had a couple of messages telling me to ask her to get tested for ADHD, but when I started bringing it up, she was very adamant that is not something she felt comfortable with. I knew she didn't like needles or going to the hospital in general, but her flat-out refusing to get tested for disorders when I told her it was not at all like a regular hospital visit surprised me. She asked me if she was able to change in her behaviors. Would I give her another chance? I said I didn't know, as I felt nothing right now and didn't know if her doing it would bring any feeling back, especially since it took my breaking point to do so. She asked if there was any compromise, and I told her again, if in a month I felt like there was enough reason to stay together I would, but that there was no guarantee that my feelings would return, but I would match any effort she also put out. She was frustrated by my answer, but I said that's how it would be. She gave me a piece of paper to look at that she was working on last night that had a list of hobbies and interests she wanted to look into, the two major ones being photography and cooking again. She told me that she was looking into these while also showing me her phone, giving proof that she was putting in applications on Indeed and Glassdoor for some entry-level positions that she might get hired in. I told her if she was able to show enough passion or interest in these hobbies that she showed, I would not care about her working, just anything to improve herself. But if she didn't do anything at all, then it would be best to look for a new job to help her if she moves out. I've also been asked in private messages if I have any personal friends to talk to. There's 2 female co-workers I confide some information in, given how many hours we work together at our hospital, and who I completely trust, as in my opinion, they are extremely grounded. They both said I would eventually get love-bombed, and this would all go back to how it once was, and that I needed to stand firm with moving on. They're very helpful friends who have even offered to let me stay over for a few nights, giving the reason that I would fall for her manipulation if I continued being anywhere near her in their own words. But it didn't feel right since I'm still technically in a relationship, but I said I would consider it if the situation worsened. But again, I find them grounded, so I always try to take their advice to heart. Despite numerous messages from you all privately or openly telling me that this will be a mistake, I want to make the attempt to give this one last try, though I feel heavily closed and guarded and still feel indifferent with our current situation. But a lot of you have told me this can eventually change with enough work from both parties. I have also taken the advice of those saying to cut off sex, which was my intention from the start anyway, by continuing to sleep in the living room. But each day she has been sleeping on the floor right below me, even when I tell her I'd rather be alone with my thoughts, telling me this is something she would not accept. Update 3. My girlfriend was very proactive last week. It was a manic influx of energy as she tried to get interested in many different things that she thought she could enjoy. I kept my promise in meeting her halfway and tried my best at helping her in whatever way I could. The only real interest that she's been mainly sticking with is photography. I've said before that she has a stockpile of clothes that she's had over the years, and she sold a few of them on Depop in order to get enough money to get a Canon 250D camera that she says is good for starting out. She's looked a lot more into this than me. I strongly assume she stuck with this hobby as it gave her a chance to spend more time with me. As she continued asking me to go out into the city to take pictures and test out her camera, given that I had promised to match her energy and didn't want to be a hypocrite, I did so even when I came home from longer shifts at the hospital. There was a major change in her behavior, however. While she usually was a very loving and affection partner, it had been turned up to its max during the first week. She asked me maybe 8 times a day how I was doing, if I was upset, what I wanted to do for the rest of the day, etc., just trying to gauge my mood. When we went out, her PDA was also maxed. She wanted to kiss, hold hands, and spend the night out as long as possible, even when I said I had to go in early to work the next day. It's hard to describe in words what she was doing. I don't know if it was exactly love bombing, but with the energy she putting out, I was fully expecting a crash to come, and it did during the second week. There was only so much I could handle before I needed a break, especially with how I was still feeling after everything that had happened prior. My friends at work are the only other people I have been engaging with, and I've told them everything that has been happening. They warned me again that I was getting love bombed like they predicted, and it would only get worse. They asked me what I would do if I was stuck with her longer than 2 months, and I said my lease would be ending soon, so it was helping ease my mind, as I wouldn't mind moving if this all turned out for the worse, while still giving her enough time of a heads up. They stated their concerns that I was coming to work more tired than usual, and it was getting noticeable, but I told them that I felt fine. During the weekend, they had insisted that I go out with them to help my mood, stating that too much time in my apartment was not good for my health in my current situation. I declined when first offered, but after being asked again the day of, I agreed, and for most of the day, I was with them having a really good time. In fact, it helped to regain my mood considerably. Naturally, my girlfriend was wondering where I had been the entire day, but I told her I had been with friends, and even though she was disappointed we couldn't go out for the day, I promised her we would spend all day tomorrow together. I get continued messages that I should immediately drop my friends and that they are manipulating me in my decisions. And think what you may, I know they are good people who look out for me. They played a large part in me quitting smoking this year, which although has made me more anxious at times, has helped with my health considerably. There's a different type of bond you form with people in our work environment, and I trust my co-workers with my life, for lack of a better term. Update 4. When I said the crash of emotions would come, I was right. It was ugly, loud, and could have been easily prevented in parts. When I posted my last update, I was not in the right mental state, so reflecting on the week before and writing helped to calm my nerves. I'm also a bit embarrassed to admit that I started to smoke a bit again, but it also helped tremendously in my mental, which was getting close to crash as of recent, and without the help of my friends, I didn't have much else to turn to. This breakdown was something I could not tell them, since I didn't want them stepping in. There had been a point where my girlfriend was in a not-so-well mood during one of our outings to the city. After returning home, she had said I was being dismissive, and if I felt angry or upset with her. Trying to be better with communicating, I said that I was getting uncomfortable with her constant need of affirmation and affection, as it was continually constant. Given that she was still sleeping in the living room at night, I was getting no time alone to myself at all while at home, and after so many outings, I was starting to get physically and emotionally drained. Truthfully, I felt physically tired more than anything, and given what my co-workers and my girlfriend say, it tends to show on my face more worse than it is. My girlfriend seemed to take this heavily, and didn't attempt to talk with me for the remainder of the day, along with the next, but was in a much more brooding mood during the second. Maybe it would have been better to apologize or communicate better during that point, as it might have been the point that a lot of this could have been avoided if I said something, but I instead took the time to nap and spend time alone, which I had rarely the chance to for over a week. Then came the third day. A lot happened over the course of this day, and a lot was said, and this was where the breaking point occurred, which caused further problems throughout the following week. I will try to be as thorough as I can, remembering everything that happened, from the start of the day to the end. When I had woken up, I had left without saying goodbye or speaking to my girlfriend, as I was almost running late. Normally, I at least check on her to see what she's doing before I leave. She had been sleeping in our room for the last few days since her mood dropped. My mood was higher than usual during work, as I was rested, had my alone time, and was just genuinely having a nice time at the hospital, which didn't happen too often. There were a few times when my co-workers would go out to eat after work, and for the past few weeks I had been declining, but on this given day I had joined them, which led to me arriving home around 9 or later. It was pretty late, and I had a few drinks. This is where I begin to have trouble writing, and where I usually stop. Arriving home, I see my girlfriend sitting down in the living room, looking at me directly as I walked in, not saying a word. It startled me, and I asked what she had been doing, as she wasn't on her phone, nor was she watching TV, just sitting as if she was staring at a wall before I had entered. She asked me where I had been, and I said I was out with friends. She immediately asked, were they my friends from work? My girlfriend is aware that I work alongside mostly women, and I have brought up my friends in the past before our relationship broke down to this point. I said yes, I was with them, and we had gone out to eat. She asked me if I had been drinking as well. I don't know if it was noticeable or not, or just a random question, but I said that I had. There was a period of uncomfortable silence that felt a lot longer in memory. She eventually brought up my month deadline on whether my feelings would change, and she asked if they have. It took me a minute to reply, as that question had taken me off guard, and I said I appreciated her efforts in what she was doing, but I was still unsure of our future together and couldn't give her a direct answer. She told me again that during our outings together that I was being dismissive, and that she felt I wasn't putting in the same effort to make this relationship work. I asked what she meant, as I was going out with her whenever she asked, and matching her effort in finding hobbies whenever she thought of something she enjoyed. To me, it just seemed like something she was just saying out of neediness. I think it was at this point she started to lose her composure, as her voice couldn't remain constant. She told me if I was aware that I wasn't smiling when we were outside, that I was quiet and rarely talked when we were spending time together. I told her she already knew how I felt, so for some of it, my mixed feelings shouldn't come as surprise. But I also explained again, my lack of talking was just from being tired from work. But I don't think she believed me. She told me she's constantly overthinking how I feel now that she knows I've lost feelings, and doesn't know what she can do to make them come back. I told her again to just find a passion for something, anything, to get out of bed and be active with anything in her life. She says it's been 2 weeks, and she's been as active as she can possibly be, to the point that it was causing her mental stress, but my mood wasn't improving, and she's wondering if anything will actually change now that it's closer to a month. And then came the full breakdown. Through tears and a broken voice, she tells me how much she loves me, how much affection and love she has given me throughout this relationship, just for me to throw it away over something as stupid as my conditions, as if it was just an excuse to end things if I ever really loved her at all while we were together. She goes on to say that even with how upset she is at me, and how hurt and betrayed she has felt by the one person she has, that she still loves me and wants to continue our relationship. She tells me there will be nothing for her if I leave. No one, no place, no future. Her will to live will be gone, and she won't know what to do with herself. Now, there's a lot I could have said during this, but I don't think I can accurately convey just how hard she was breaking down emotionally during this exchange. There were points as to where she was almost screaming, completely bawling, and it all just made me freeze, as this was the first time I've ever witnessed her fall apart at this level. She goes on again to say, there's no reason to live if this is the end. It won't matter what job she gets. Another month will not be enough, and she knows I still won't want to be with her, and that she will have nothing. After everything was said, she locked herself again in our room and stayed there for a few more days. Whenever I tried to knock to initiate conversation, she screamed for me to go away, and I did. A few days later, she had finally calmed down enough to where we could speak to each other, and she changed her attitude 180 degrees. She still was upset, but extremely apologetic in what she did and said, telling me that a lot of it was just in the moment, and she didn't meant it. The days that I was finally able to spend alone, without her or my friends, gave me the mental to finally do what I should have a month ago. I told her as gently and as calmly as I could that it was over, that there was no chance that we could be together at this point, and I no longer wanted to be in a relationship. I told her I would let her stay for an additional 2 months until she could find a job and help her get on her feet. I also said that if she was unable to do anything by that time, then I would be gone and moved out. She started to cry again, but in a much more defeated manner that almost made me break myself, but she agreed to the terms, and it was finally done. She was able to get a job at a supermarket about a week afterwards, but only part-time at first, as that was all they were offering. After our final confrontation, our speaking terms were more or less dead. Whenever she was off work, she would be in her room alone for the remainder of the day and night. I had stayed on the couch, as at this point I was pretty much used to it and didn't really mind it. It feels really wrong and selfish to say, but I felt extremely free and happy for a bit. I didn't inform my coworkers about my breakup when it happened, and just continued to vaguely say that we were working on it, but during that time I frequently started going out a lot more with them after work, as staying in our apartment felt more like a chore and depressing. I had hit a high that I had not felt in a long while, and then everything came crashing on me the following week. I had contracted pneumonia and was off work for about 2 weeks to recover. At first I thought I had caught a cold, but one day it hit like a brick, and my lungs felt at 50% capacity. I couldn't take a deep breath without going into a fit of coughing, and I constantly felt fatigued. Even now, as I write this update with most of my symptoms gone, I still have to use an inhaler to help myself breath at times. For most of the days that I had been sick, I was sleeping, most days between 12 to 14 hours, and the time that I was awake, I was lying down. When I told her what I had contracted and she saw how sick I was, she offered to let me have the bedroom again, but I refused and said that I was fine. Since she was working part-time, there was still a lot of time that she was spending at home, and for the first few days, she left me alone. But towards the middle of the first week I was sick, she started to occasionally check on me to see if I was okay and if I wanted anything to eat. Honestly, I hated that me being sick forced us to interact, not because I was mad or anything, but because it felt incredibly weird and awkward, and that I had to depend on her now for a few things, not even a week after we had broken up. I didn't feel well enough to get groceries like I normally did, and since she already worked at a supermarket, she insisted that she buy food instead, and when I gave her my card, she refused it and said she would buy it herself. For the most part, I was snacking on fruit and cookies, but she said if I was going to get better that I eat actual meals, so she began to cook for me, even when I said I didn't want anything. Even with this, we didn't eat together for the first week, as she went back to her room after checking on me. But during the start of the second week of me being home, she started to sit down with me while I was awake and talk with me. She told me about her day at work and her co-workers, and a bunch of other stuff. It felt like a lot of it were things she wanted to tell me earlier but couldn't, because everything was still raw. But when she started to talk, she didn't stop, and honestly, I enjoyed listening to her talk about her day, because it felt different. It went from talking to us, watching TV together during nights that I couldn't fall asleep, to us just talking about our issues that we've been holding to ourselves for a while. It was extremely cathartic, and there was no yelling or arguing, just listening. It felt a way that we hadn't talked in a long time, not since from before we got together years ago when we're friends and classmates. Sometime during the second week, I had hit a point where I felt extremely ill, and I didn't want to talk or do anything, but I couldn't sleep either because I kept on coughing. She didn't go to work that day and stayed beside me for a long while. We didn't talk at all, but she made sure I was still eating and drinking water. There's a lot that can be said on how those 2 weeks made me feel about my situation with her and everything that had happened, but I can't convey them in words, much less writing, but I'll just say it was a lot of time to think. Since I've recovered, I had been trying to make a bigger effort to talk with her, but at the same time, not trying to make it feel forced, as it may have felt a month ago. Just random conversations about random things, about how her photos were going, how work was doing, if she liked her a boss, just whatever. She spent less time in her room and more time in the living room with me when I had gotten home, just talking about her day and work, customers and co-workers, and in turn, I told her about my day. Gradually, within these weeks, it feels as if the transition of being in relationship to being friends is a lot more apparent, and it feels better and more organic this way, as it's become easier to communicate. Even still, though, there's a barrier between us, something that formed from our final argument, and it's hard to describe exactly what it is, but it's there. The deadline that I had formed for me moving out is at the end of September, as that's when my lease ends. Update 5. The end of September approached quickly, and my lease was set to expire. I had made my decision not to renew it. I needed a fresh start away from her and the memories of our relationship. I had been contemplating this for weeks, and while I was grateful for the moments of connection we shared during my recovery, I knew I couldn't stay. On the last Saturday of the month, I told her it was time for me to leave. I explained my reasons, trying to keep my tone calm and steady. I said that I needed to focus on myself and my future, and that living together was no longer a viable option for me. I saw her expression change as the words settled in. She started to cry, and the argument erupted almost immediately. She accused me of abandoning her and not caring about everything we had been through. She yelled that I was throwing away our love for no reason, and she couldn't understand why I would leave when we had been getting along better. I tried to respond calmly, but her accusations were hurtful. I told her that I was not abandoning her, but rather trying to take care of myself. As the argument escalated, she became more frantic. I could see the pain and anger in her eyes, and it turned into something frightening. In a moment of rage, she lunged at me. I didn't see it coming. I was caught off guard, and before I knew it, she struck me across the face. I stumbled back, shocked and confused by her sudden aggression. Realizing what had just happened, she froze, her expression shifting from anger to panic. She started to apologize, but I felt the sting of betrayal. I left the room to collect myself. My heart raced, and I could feel the adrenaline pumping through me. I didn't know what to do next. After a few minutes, I decided to leave the apartment to clear my head. I drove aimlessly, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on me. I ended up at a nearby hospital after calling a friend who insisted on checking me out. I sat in the waiting room, feeling ashamed and confused. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but I knew I needed to be seen by a doctor. After a quick examination, they confirmed I was fine physically, but suggested I take some time to think about the emotional impact of what had happened. I stayed there for a few hours, mostly in silence, reflecting on everything that had transpired between us. The reality of our situation felt clearer now. Once I was released, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. I felt a mix of anger, disappointment, and relief. I realized I had to reach out to her one last time. I sent her a message, telling her that I wouldn't be pressing charges. I didn't want to escalate things further, but I needed to make my stance clear. I told her to stay away from me forever. I reminded her that she had a lifeline, but she needed to use it wisely. I didn't want any more contact. I was ready to move on, and I hoped she could find a way to heal as well. I hit send and felt an odd sense of calm wash over me. It was finally over. I packed my things the next day and moved out. I left behind the memories, the arguments, and the love that had once existed. It was time for me to start fresh, away from everything that had been holding me back. I didn't look back as I closed the door for the last time.